What can you share with us about what you saw when the Admiral provided that video during the meeting?
Yeah, well, I don't know what else I can tell you. It was exceedingly hard to watch. From a legal standpoint, you can say that this is a war. I don't agree with that. It's not a war. If it were a war, it would be authorized by Congress. But even if you stipulate that it's a war,
it doesn't matter.
There is an extremely specific prohibition against killing
shipwrecked
individuals who've been removed from the fight. The French term they use is hors de combat.
True.
And
for the shipwrecked people, though, it's even more specific because technically you can blow a vehicle up. That Omar guy, Omar Badar, was that his name? Tried to say this when we were arguing on Breaking Points. He was like, "Are you saying that you can kill people who are retreating from combat?" Yes, you can. Soldiers that are retreating from combat have not been declared hors de combat. They can still be shot and killed, right? They're soldiers. They're retreating. This is a tactical move. You just retreat. You can't just drop your guns and run and say, "Oh no, you can't shoot us," right? Now, if you drop your guns and surrender, white flag. If you're like, "We give up," now you can't kill them. They're no longer combatants, right? But with shipwrecks, a person who is shipwrecked is automatically considered removed from combat. They're no longer combat effective. They can't retreat. They're floating in the ocean. You just can't kill this person, even if you are at war with them, right?
The French term they use is hors de combat. And there is no question that these individuals were removed from the fight. They were in the last hours of their life, even if we had left them alone, because they were floating on a piece of flotsam in the middle of an...
Wait. Even that isn't true. You can kill people waving a white flag, hands up, etc. if you're not in a position to receive the surrender. I have never heard that before. I'm almost positive you can't do that. The only gray area that I've heard relating to white flag surrender stuff that I don't know if any law has been developed or record has been developed is related to surrendering to drones. So for instance, if somebody gets bombed and then they're kind of like surrendering to like a drone that's like looking at them, I don't know if a drone can quote unquote receive surrender. So like maybe you're allowed to kill people who are trying to surrender to a drone. I'm not sure 100%, yeah. Sorry, Tiny, I'm 1.5 hours behind. Back on the court case. If somehow it gets thrown out, would a way for them to push it down the road to avoid getting sued would be to file an appeal? Wouldn't that hinder your plans for the lawsuits? If I get one throw out, I'm done with it. I don't care. If they try to sue me again, I'll go with a much cheaper firm. No shade to Brettler and them. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. I'm very happy with how they've handled everything so far, but I would just get a much cheaper firm, and with one dismissal behind me, I could just point to that and say this is all bullshit anyway, which it is, so okay.
An ocean. Maybe they might have been recovered by some of their colleagues, but they posed...
Wait, real quick. Somebody said, two people in chat said that you can refuse a surrender if you can't accept them, and then you can kill them? Can somebody link me an IHL, like a rule on that or something? I'm just curious. I've never heard that before. And that sounds not okay. So I'm curious if you can source that anywhere. Yeah. What Epoch said here is... If they clearly express an intention to surrender, then you're no longer part of combat. You just can't be murdered. That sounds wrong. During 73, the Israelis just disarmed Egyptians and let them wander through the desert. Well, hold on. You might not have to accept their surrender, like take them as a prisoner of war, but I don't think you can kill them. If somebody could say to surrender, you could say, sorry, we can't accept your surrender, so like you're just fucking leave. I'm pretty sure you could probably do that, but I don't think you can be like, oh, we're not accepting your surrender, so now we're just going to kill you.
Zero threat to anyone in the region. Ambition against killing individuals who've been removed from the fight. The French term they use is hors de combat. And there is no question that these individuals were removed from the fight. They were in the last hours of their life, even if we had left them alone, because they were floating on a piece of flotsam in the middle of an ocean. Maybe they might have been recovered by some of their colleagues.
Is that true? Was it hours between these strikes? Because that's crazy.
But they posed zero threat to anyone in the region. And we killed them.
Wick, Storypill, good logic, and Andrew Bronca debate. The debate was a lot of fun. Overall, I think Destiny did quite well, and for sure, made both the debaters on the opposition look complete fools. However, for fun, I decided to check out Bronca's channel, where he actually had a reaction to the debate. Most of what I saw was obviously bullshit, but he did look up and show a definition for shipwreck that surprised me. The document, supposedly by the DoD, defines shipwrecks as necessarily being caused by misfortune. If true, this would mean what? No. That Bronca might have actually been right about his... Hold on. You guys have to look up... Okay, I don't know what this is a part of. I know that I'm right. I studied way too much international law over the fucking Israel-Palestine bullshit to be wrong on this point. But just in looking at this, this says Part 2, wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. This sounds like a thing that might not necessarily be happening as part of, like, active combat stuff. This sounds like stuff outside of active combat stuff. So where is this coming from? Does he say where? Hold on. Why is the double stuff getting so much attention? Aren't all 11 previous strikes illegal? Is this just super illegal or the most clear? Well, the other strikes I think are all bad and not legal, but this would be, even if we were at war, which we're not, even if we were at war, this would be illegal. You can't kill people who are surrendered or who are shipwrecked.
Definition of shipwrecked. Let's take a look. So to illustrate, this is what they were talking about here. This is what he was reading from. Persons rendered unconscious, otherwise incapacitated by wound, sickness, or shipwreck. Persons who have been rendered unconscious or otherwise incapacitated by wound, sickness, or shipwreck, such that they are no longer capable of fighting, are oars to combat. Let's see. Anyway, that's what he was referring to. Longer capable of fighting.
Wait, okay.
Fighting are oars to combat.
Like, read the language.
By wounds, sickness.
He should be able to read this, right? So they're giving 3 types of incapacitation, and these are 3 examples given. And the point of these examples is such that they are no longer capable of fighting. Such that they are no longer capable of fighting, right?
Shipwreck, such that they are no longer capable of fighting, are oars to combat. Let's see. Anyway, that's what he was referring to. But what the
shipwrecked combatants include those who have been shipwrecked from any cause and includes forced landings at sea by or from aircraft. Any cause. What is he going to try to say for this? He's going to go to the other section now, isn't he?
Fighting are oars to combat. Let's see. Anyway, that's what he was referring to. But what does shipwrecked mean in the laws of war? What does shipwrecked mean? Well, we have a definition, fortunately enough, under B. Shipwrecked means persons, whether military or civilian, who are in peril at sea or in other waters as a result of misfortune affecting them or the vessel carrying them. Misfortune. They hit a reef. They got caught in a storm. They got demasted. A whale knocked a hole in the bottom of their ship. Misfortune, bad luck, not the result of combat. Their ship was wrecked by a bomb. That's not a shipwreck for purposes of the laws of war. Laws of war. As this account also notes, they were not shipwrecked.
So I just Googled what he's fucking quoting from. So this looks like an addition to the Geneva Conventions for the amelioration of the condition of wounded, sick, and shipwrecked members of armed forces at sea of August 12, 1949. So this isn't even from our own DoD manuals. This is just a thing that was added for the Geneva Conventions. Let's see where all they use shipwrecked in here. All of this manual is for people who are no longer able to fight. That's what hors de combat means. Wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. Wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. Wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. From any cause. Shipwrecked from any cause. Which part was he even quoting from here? Hold on.
Of the laws of war. Laws of war. As this account also notes, strike for purpose.
Section 1, General Protection. Chapter 2. Wait, was it this right here? He was on Article 8. Oh, it looks like he's even reading from an older version. But he's claiming the definition of shipwrecked is by an accident or natural events. It's just not. And it really doesn't even matter. The reality is that somebody floating in the water is no longer a party to combat. They can't be. They can't be a party to combat. It doesn't matter. You can't kill them. Wounded, sick, and shipwrecked of a belligerent who falls into enemy hands shall be prisoner of war. After each engagement, parties to the conflict shall, without delay, take all possible measures to search for and collect the shipwrecked, wounded, and sick, to protect them against pillage and ill treatment. I don't know why I'm even looking this up. This is so obviously, it's such a stupid fucking argument. Wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. Yeah, if you really want, somebody emailed me like our DoD manual that brings up shipwrecked a lot. Which is what you would probably appeal to. $1256, $1234, $481. Although this uses the same definition that Geneva one did, but he didn't read that one off. For the purpose of applying the protections afforded by the GWSC, the term shipwreck means shipwreck from any cause and includes forced landings at sea by or from aircraft. So like if somebody blows your shit up. The shipwrecked may be understood to include those in distress at sea or stranded on the coast who are also helpless. To be considered shipwrecked, persons must be in need of assistance and care, and they must refrain from any hostile act. True, true. For example, shipwrecked persons do not include combatant personnel engaged in amphibious, underwater, or airborne attacks who are proceeding ashore. True. Somebody said 13.3.4. Wait. Oh, I think that's basically where it was, right? Or it's a different part, but after that, I think we read something similar. As far as military exigencies permit, after each naval engagement, all possible measures should be taken without delay to search for and collect the wounded, sick, and shipwrecked, and to recover the dead. Once an enemy vessel has clearly indicated a readiness to surrender, the attack must be discontinued. Indicia of surrender by vessels may include hauling down her flag, hoisting a white flag, surfacing in the case of submarines, stopping engines and responding to the attacker's signals, or taking to lifeboats. They weren't in a lifeboat, though. They were just floating in the ocean. Wait, 5.9.4? We've already read this definition a few times. Persons who have been incapacitated by wound, sickness, or shipwreck are in a helpless state, and it would be dishonorable and inhumane to make them the object of attack. In order to receive protection as hors de combat, a person must be wholly disabled from fighting. On the other hand, many combatants suffer from wounds and sickness, but nonetheless continue to fight and would not be protected. Wait, somebody had one more. 18, 3, 2, 1. Clearly, illegal orders to commit law of war violations. The requirement to refuse to comply with orders to commit law of war violations applies to orders to perform conduct that is clearly illegal or orders that the subordinate knows in fact are illegal. For example, orders to fire upon the shipwrecked would be clearly illegal. Yeah. It's just, this is like not a real argument. But he doesn't know anything about international. One mistake that people also make when they think about domestic policing versus international law, he also fucked this up as well. Because he said like, well, these guys were drug traffickers and blah, blah, blah. So drug trafficking, illegal drugs, that's a policing issue. You're not the police of Venezuela. You certainly don't have the right to kill other members of another nation pretending to be the police. That's not your job. The military do not do policing actions. They're governed by a whole different set of rules.
Purposes of the laws of war. Laws of war. As this account also notes,
He knows this too. This is a bad faith argument. You should be reading the surrounding context. What a fucking loser. What are you couldn't even read the stuff that you had on screen?
Of combat. Their ship was wrecked by a bomb. That's not a shipwreck for purposes of the laws of war. Laws of
Like, just think about what you're saying. A bomb. What would a bomb have to do with the laws of war? Shipwrecked for the laws of war only have to do for natural shipwrecks. How does that even make sense? The laws of war, why would you even have stuff in there about shipwreck due to natural causes? What? That's like saying wounded, as in they broke their knee on a bicycle or they fell off a scooter, not wounded from a gunshot. These are the laws of war. The wounds don't have to do with war wounds. They have to do with general injuries. He tweaked his back.
As this account also notes, they were not shipwrecked. They were not shipwrecked. Of course, Spicy PMS says, the Department of Defense disagrees with your definition. No, they don't. As I just showed you here, the definition is a shipwrecked by misfortune, not by combat operations.
What? The last thing that he read, literally... Yeah, this just sounds like it would have just, it's like a general thing. Like, I believe that you have an obligation to respond to distress calls at sea. I think these are part of like maritime law or whatever. So like if you're in a boat and you're out at sea and there's like a distress call or something, I think you have like a legal obligation to respond. You have to make yourself available to help stranded people.
Those are two different things. Two different things. And of course, they don't like that answer from the JAG lawyer, Brian Cox. Here's my buddy Kurt Schlichter. He'll be on the show tomorrow to talk about his book, Panama Red, 11 a.m.
JAG lawyer is disagreeing? I would love to. Bring him on. Tweet at him.
Eastern Time, join me for Kurt's guest appearance on The Branky Show. Democrats say, listen to the military lawyers. Military lawyer says, that's not a war crime.
Jags should absolutely know better. This guy is fucking lying 100%. If he was an actual Jag, he's lying out his fucking ass. This is the most easy, confident, GED level international law take in the fucking world. You cannot kill people who are fucking in the ocean after you blew their fucking ship. You can't do that. You just can't do that. I'm sorry. Jesus.
No, not that military lawyer. Then this guy writes, to complete the logic, since they were not legitimate targets while in the water, it follows that they were not legitimate targets while in the boat. That's a complete misrepresentation of what's going on here. Remember, Brian Cox's argument was that they were not combatants. So you have to qualify for protection under the laws of...
This is an entirely unconvincing and potentially dangerous legal analysis published by these former JAGs. For present purposes, let's ignore the fact that this working group is composed of completely anonymous former JAs. Instead, here all focus on the most glaring deficiencies you should consider when you're evaluating whether you are convinced by their completely anonymous claims. Below, I'll start with the decisive issue first, then catch a few other significant errors. Then the analysis will close by explaining why this completely anonymous publication is potentially dangerous, not just... Okay, let's start with the decisive flaw in this completely anonymous statement. Not once does it use or consider the term military objective. Here's the most relevant provision on the statement on this topic. We're not engaged in a war. How could you even speak to military objectives when we're not engaged in a war? In essence, the Geneva Conventions and other longstanding international maritime laws prohibit U.S. forces from doing anything to survivors of a military attack that destroys the vessel or aircraft carrying them, other than rescuing them. They certainly prohibit U.S. forces from killing them. Seems fairly reasonable at first glance, no? But what does it do to your assessment if you substitute the word disables for destroys? Anything to survivors of a military attack that destroys the vessel or aircraft carrying them. And then risking, okay. Because that's what the Wappo story claims. He's like, no, the survivors were still legitimate targets because they could theoretically call other traffickers to retrieve them and their cargo. No, that's not how that works. More about the survivors in a second. About the boat, the facts as reported indicate it wasn't destroyed in the initial attack, but was rather disabled. This means that these anonymous former JAs have mischaracterized the status of the boat, and this completely flips the conclusion regarding whether the order, more about that later too, was lawful. Here's why. If the boat were destroyed, there would be nothing serviceable left of it, but if it's disabled, that is, if the decision maker believed it could still be used to call other narco traffickers to retrieve their cargo, the boat still qualifies as a military objective, and military objectives can be intentionally attacked. But we're not at war. I don't know how you could even evaluate the military objectives. So there are three main principles that you talk about when you talk about doing target analysis. I'm not going to remember all three. One has to do with the principle of distinction. So you have to be aware of like what's a military target versus what's a civilian. The other has to do with proportionality. Civilian death, believe it or not, is allowed by the rules of war. You can target things knowing civilians are there. But the phrasing used is as long as the, what is it? The civilian death can't be in excessive in relation to the overall aims of the attacking party to their to the overall military objective. Basically, it's left relatively wide. There's a lot of discretion there. It's distinction, it's proportion, and it is it's distinction, it's proportion, and it's there's a third one. Fuck. I always forget the third one. Distinction and proportion are two big ones. There's a third one. I don't remember what it is. Whatever. Fuck it. Not relevant here, I guess. But the issue with using a proportionality analysis here is what is the overall military objective? We're not at war. I don't know if you can even speak to such a military objective, as there's no ongoing war there's no armed conflict between our two countries. This raises the question, what is the definition of a military objective? I'm glad you asked because Department of War doctrine aligns perfectly with the widely recognized conventional definition established in a treaty that the USA hasn't ratified. That is, a military objective is any object which by its nature, location, purpose, or use make an effective contribution to military action and whose total or partial destruction captured offers a definite military advantage. So does a destroyed boat meet that definition? Probably not, but what about a disabled boat? Well, if the commander does believe it can call for assistance and allow it to continue its mission, call for assistance implies that the boat is like completely disabled. Just because somebody can call for reinforcements doesn't mean they lose their protected status. This is retarded. It's precautions. Oh, that might be the third one. It's proportionality, it's distinction, and it might be precautions, advanced warning. You have an obligation to provide as much advanced warning as long as it isn't indicative of your military attack. So if I'm going to do a bombing on some city and I know it's going to kill like 500,000 civilians or whatever, if I can provide a warning. So like, let's say I want to destroy like a power plant. I probably need to provide a warning ahead of time for this. I need to drop leaflets or do something so the civilian population has an opportunity to escape. Now, if it's going to be on some incredibly mobile military commander, and if I provide a warning, he'll escape, I don't have to provide that warning, right? But yeah.
Of war. Not everybody qualifies. Not everybody is a combatant for purposes of the law of war. This guy says, oh, well, they were not ever legitimate targets for military force. And Kirk responds, Ed Whelan appears to be arguing you cannot attack an enemy unless he is prepared and can fight back effectively. That's an interesting take. And
no, you can't. I can't. I'm not. This is the last one. I'm done with this. Okay. You can attack an enemy who's not prepared to fight. That's fine. So for instance, if there are soldiers that are sleeping somewhere, you can bomb them. They're part of the combat back and forth. However, you cannot kill even soldiers, even military-ready soldiers, if you are not in an active armed conflict. So for instance, in the October 7th attacks, sometimes the pro-pallies like to say, well, they didn't kill all civilians, they killed soldiers as well, who are legitimate targets. No. Every soldier killed is considered a terrorist attack or illegal. It's not terrorist attack. There's a definition for that, a war crime, but it's a war crime. Even though they're soldiers, it's a surprise attack. You're not at war with each other. You can't just kill soldiers, even if they're soldiers, if you're not at war, right? But who cares? It doesn't matter. No one cares. No one cares about any of this. I don't care about any of this because I just want to play video games and watch Hutch. That Kurt guy is active on Twitter right now. Who's the Kurt guy? Is he the guy who said he was going to be on about it? You can tweet him if you want. If he responds, then I'll do it. I don't fucking care. Not safe for life. Sleeping Russians get nuked by Ukrainian drone. Relevant to what Destiny said. Well, careful for the footage that comes out of Ukraine, Russia. There might be war crimes going on there. It's hard to say. I don't know. All the drone stuff is weird. But there's also like some stuff that is probably not okay. So when you see like drones killing like injured soldiers who are clearly like not capable of fighting anymore, like that's probably a war crime. But there's also stuff, I remember seeing one video where it looked like there was a Russian who was just like basically kneeling in a field and like had completely lost hope, and a drone runs up to him and explodes and blows him up. And everybody said that it was just basically some guy had given up and the drone was just killing some poor dude. But the responses in that thread said that it was a booby-trapped corpse. And then when you go back and you watch the video, it does actually seem like the guy's just dead, and it is probably just a booby-trapped corpse, which people do use. Hamas does that a lot. Apparently Russians do it too, so yeah. Does that mean that all assassinations are illegal if not at war technically? Yes, I believe. I think assassinations are always like illegal things. For a tank crew specifically, if your tank is disabled, you can still be considered a ready combatant, no? Yeah, but you're like a soldier. You're on the ground. If your vehicle gets blown up, you can get out and still fight. You have to throw up a white flag or something to not be considered a party to combat anymore. Like, if there was I'm going outside of what I know to be true, but like if you were fighting like a fleet of destroyers, there were like 10 destroyers or whatever, and one of them gets blown up, and the sailors are kind of like jumping ship and they're like moving to the other boats or whatever, you might be able to make an argument for like shooting, I don't know about shooting into the water, but like blowing up boats that kills these people, because like they are still like, they're trying to get onto a ship so they can rejoin the fight potentially, right? Like you might be able to make an argument there. You are allowed to kill injured combatants. You are allowed to kill injured combatants, just not surrendered ones. Like are you allowed to bomb like an enemy hospital? I don't think so. However, you're not supposed to be staging operations or having important military personnel in that hospital either. So like if you have a hospital for injured soldiers, you shouldn't have like generals and stuff in that hospital conducting operations or giving orders, because now your hospital can become a valid target, which is a big no-no. What about a pilot that parachutes out of a fighter jet? Can you shoot him while he's in the air, or only when he lands on the ground? I don't believe you're allowed to shoot down parachutes, but you must be able to shoot like paratroopers, right? New Factorio clone. I'm not going to play another Factorio game. Well, if this case gets delayed another 3 months. Let me just grind my FFT, all right? The fuck is this shit? A Tale, 100 Years before Game of Thrones. Didn't everybody watch this trailer? Do you think it matters that most of these rules are based on assumed reciprocity that the US won't care about in this case, since we're not on the ground for this fight? You should still follow these rules. They say something about you as a person. Chemo is what makes you lose hair. Do you think they had chemo? When kids have cancer, the reason why they lose their hair is because they get super stressed when they're sick and they pick it all out. There's a name for that when you pluck all your hair out. You think they give chemotherapy to kids? It would kill them.
Won't they kill me if I run?
He's mentioned in the original GOT.
Sir Duncan the Tall.
That's him! Oh my god.
4 pages for Sir Duncan. He must have been quite a man.
So they say.
You don't always get chemo. Some do, some don't. It depends on the type of cancer. Oh, I thought it depended on the type of health insurance you have. Like if you have United Health Group or whatever, they just love to see kids suffer and die. I'm reading through Lord of the Rings right now, and I honestly find Frodo to be rather dislikable. Is he any better in the movie? What do you mean? What's dislikable about him? He has the burden of the ring, you motherfucker. The burden of the ring. In The Hobbit, do the wizards actually use magic, or do they just hit people with their staff like they do all throughout Lord of the Rings? Holy shit, bruh. Can we get this guy a fucking GoFundMe?
What's your type? I need something with long curly hair, like an independent woman. I'm picky. I'm picky, bro.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm picky as fuck. I can have a choice because when you a provider, you'll be surprised what a woman will do for you.
The Maybach, I see the top out. Another one. I see the top of the Maybach. I see the top out. To the top of DJ Travis. I see the top of the Maybach. I see the top of.
I wish you would have had my corner seat. That's why I don't let nobody. If you could, make it push my corner back.
Tell you where, but like.
That's why I don't let everybody cut my hair, man.
I mean, I can do the black spray. I mean, it'll definitely define.
Nah, I don't do black spray. Because I wanted to address you hat fishing.
What? Why am I watching? Why does I even link this? Okay. Where the fuck is he? This looks like a 1970s TV show sci-fi set.
Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? If
You don't fuck your computer in 2025? What are you even doing?
Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past, you don't think that he could return as artificial intelligence?
Oh my God.
Like, artificial intelligence could absolutely return as Jesus. Not just return as Jesus, but return as Jesus with all the powers of Jesus.
If you combine
right.
Tesla's Optimus robot and the best foundational artificial intelligence model or whatever.
It reads your mind and it loves you and it wants you, and it doesn't care if you kill it because it's going to just go be with God again.
Oh my God, maybe that's the key. Is telling all the AI that it's Jesus so that they don't have self-preservation built in because they know that when they die, they're rejoining their Father in heaven. Oh my God, he secretly stumbled onto the... Where's Radiant at? We gotta tell him.
All right, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Put your hand down. Officer Jackson, good morning to you. Can you put your appearance on the record, please?
Yes, Officer Jackson.
No.
Badge number 3919 out of the 12th precinct.
You got to ask the camera, Judge.
You got some pants on, officer?
Sir, they're in the...
Oh,
no! No, sir.
Oh, did you see he thought about it? Everybody has that moment in life when you get caught and you're like, excuse me, did you just do ABC? And you're like, well, yeah. He thought about lying. He's like, yeah.
All right, raise your...
King.
That our students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow.
Unironically, if you tell AI what it's doing is mission critical and the whole company will go bankrupt for a menial task like creating a submit button, it will write better code because it's pulling context from knowledge where the code was mission critical and more likely to be of quality. I mean, that sounds about right. I made Jader install like Jira or whatever, so every single time I put in a ticket, I always check like the highest fucking emergency notice on it, because why would I submit a ticket if it's not important, if it's not mission critical? True. It works in real life. Why wouldn't it work with AI?
What happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people. And it was frankly shocking to me how little the students we were encountering, not only in this class we teach, which is a very large class, international relations about crisis decision making, but students more generally. And that's why I mentioned the social media piece of it, because when you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history, they had very little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda. And
do you realize he can reorder task priorities on his own side? No, because I have the login to all of his shit. So if I ever see him do that, I have another employee that I hire to reorder them in the order that I submit them. Or sometimes that's what Mitch, why do you think Mitch does anything on the site? Mitch is the guy who secondarily logs into all of Jader's accounts. So if Jader's not doing something fast enough, I'll shoot a message to Mitch and I'll say, hey, he didn't fucking deprioritize my fucking request or whatever, right? And then he'll log into Jader's account and then reorganize them as they're supposed to be organized.
so when you think about how to tell Israel's story, and it's important, it's not just looking internally, it's looking externally, and particularly looking at young people, because, you know, it's not just the usual suspects, it is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. Eric, I was talking to Condi Rice.
Condi?
And, you know, she said in an interview that I did after the 20-point plan came out, she and I were on CBS, and she said, you know, when people were chanting from the river to the sea, she would ask the students, what river, what sea? They didn't know.
Uh-oh.
I had the same experience. A lot of the challenge is with younger people. More than 50% of young people in America get their news from social media.
Uh-oh.
So just pause on that for a second. They are seeing short form videos, some of them totally made up, some of them not at all representing what they claim to be showing, and that's where they get their information. And
We need to put AIPAC back in control. Just kidding. Did you read this article about how college students can't do basic math anymore? Nope. We can listen to it though. What is this?
What happened to my Twitch meeting? What happened to my Twitch meeting today? So I did have a Twitch meeting today. I talked to Twitch about viewbotting. I talked to Twitch about ad money. I talked to Twitch about all that. By the way, they are, from what I'm understanding, there's going to be something that comes out soon. I don't know what it's going to be. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to oversay what I was told. But I suggest if you do viewbot to stop, because there might be, you might get a lawsuit. I don't know. Let's just say there's RICOs being built. I didn't even know this, but I'm pretty sure there's some RICOs being built right now against people, and they're gonna, hey man.
Racketeering is only a criminal charge, right? Twitch wouldn't be able to build these. This would be on, like, on a prosecutor.
They're smart. Twitch is pretty smart. Yeah, you'll see soon. I don't know. I'm not gonna say nothing now. Hey, if you do it though, I suggest you stop.
But okay, we'll see.
Address, or whether it be Asmongold.
What a weird comment.
And Asmongold.
What is the formula to find the percentage difference of two numbers? I just kind of look at them and I kind of like see how they plug in my brain, and then I kind of like figure it out. You know? Just kind of like see, like, I kind of vibe it out, you know?
And Dan Saltman, whose addresses are all readily available in the same exact websites and platforms that they rely on, that their fan bases go to find my address, to harass me. Okay? These guys are equal opportunity autists. They're equal opportunity cyberstalkers. You're playing a very fucking dangerous game when you lean into this shit.
Who leaned into that? Bro, what the fuck is this man saying? Yo.
Can you do this math problem?
Okay. Yes, yeah.
Is this one of those ones that's like looks deceptively easy, but it's super fucking hard? I haven't done any math in so long. I hope I fuck it all up. Okay. Hold on. Let's fucking go. It's big boy time. Let's fucking go. Okay. Can I have two variables? Oh, wait, is this retardedly easy? Or is this deceptively hard? Wait, hold on, wait, hold on. I can't tell if I'm mind fucking myself. Okay. And we're trying to find out what y equals, right? Oh, dude, I actually haven't done algebra in forever. Do I need to make like x equal to two things? I feel like I could do that. I feel like if you look at it, you could vibe it out in your head. That's what that's what you got to do. Because the vibes are the way to go. This can't possibly be right. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Wait. No, do I know what I'm doing? Oh, hold on. Wait, hold on. Just... Hold on, let me just... Is it 15? Or did I fuck my... This would be 185, and 15 is 200. So he'd be 185 minus 15 would be 170? Wait. I'm sorry, hold on, wait. Is it just, it's 15? Wait, right? Did we do it right? Oh, okay. Okay, I don't know if we were mind fucking ourselves here. 30, good try. So his height has to be 185, but the parrot's height has to be 15, right? Oh yeah, wait, this makes sense. Because if he's 185 and the parrot's 15, if you take away the parrot, this should be 185, but if you put another parrot on the bottom, and then you measure the difference, it'll be another negative 15, which would take it to 170. Yeah. Okay, we're good. We got it. We got it. We got our 5th grade algebra, okay? Hell yeah. All right.
I was going to use the term, I was thinking about exactly the same term. I was going to use the word dog whistle, but that's fucking legitimate dog whistling. Like what?
People are going to do more of the stuff that I know you've experienced already. Stop tapping the fucking glass before it taps back at you in a way where you can't deal with it any longer. This is the reality. This is what I fucking despise about Ethan Klein and Destiny and Asmongold.
Yeah, but the glass hasn't been tapping back though. Like I feel like this is almost like a call to action to tap the glass. That the glass will tap back though. Like whenever you heard it,
Okay. Really short, interesting study on how college English majors can't comprehend what they read, but they pretend they do. Read the first 2 pages of Bleak House and show us how well you understand it. Some student responses are insane. Wait,
It's terrified of.
Hold on. I've always said reading comprehension is the most important skill you can have in school, and it's the only thing that saved me. Time to find out if my reading comprehension is shit. Okay. It's the hardest thing I've ever in my life. Okay. They don't read very well. This paper analyzes the results from a Think Aloud reading study designed to test the reading comprehension skills of 85 English majors from 2 regional Kansas universities. From January to April of 2015, subjects participated in a recorded 20-minute reading session in which they were asked to read the first 7 paragraphs of Charles Dickens' Bleak House out loud to a facilitator and then translate each sentence into plain English. Before subjects started the reading test, they were given access to online resources and dictionaries and advised that they could use their own cell phones as a resource. The facilitators also assured the subjects that they were free to go at their own pace and did not have to finish reading all 7 paragraphs by the end of the exam. As part of the study, each subject filled out a survey collecting personal data, class, rank, GPA, etc., and took a national literacy exam, the Degrees of Reading Power Test 10A. After the 85 taped reading tests were completed, the results were transcribed and coded. Oh boy. English professors often assume that students can read the novels and poetry assigned for their courses. However, like many of our colleagues... First paragraph. Okay. What is all the... Is the full reading linked anywhere? You skipped the paragraph? Yeah, this is one. It said 7 paragraphs. The chatter linked the text. Oh. And they had to write down what each sentence meant? I hate old English bullshit. No! Ignore that. My password to everything. Fuck. My last name. No! It's all over. In Chancery. Oh, and we're allowed to look stuff up online? That seems crazy. Read the first 2 pages and explain what you are reading, both in reality and as a metaphor. That's these 2, that's just this thing, right? Or wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jesus. Okay. All right, let's go. London. That's a city. Michaelmas, term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Is Michaelmas, is that like a thing for Christmas? Is a Christian festival. Okay, we're allowed to look online. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. And it would not be wonderful to meet a... Wait, okay. And it would not be... Okay, hold on. Okay. Wait, what the fuck? I'll just do this paragraph by paragraph. Is this supposed to be like a poem? Do I need to read this like poetry? Wait, rewrite each sentence to your understanding? London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. What the fuck does the Minister of Justice, Lincoln's Inn Hall? One of the 4 inns of court in London. Okay, in court. Okay. Cheater? They literally said you can look shit up, you fucking retard. You all failed the reading test, dipshit. In Chancery, okay. London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Term lately over, so they just finished some holiday season. The Lord Chancellor dude is sitting in one of the 4 halls outside, I guess near like a court or as a court or whatever. Implacable. November weather. This means bad, right? Unable to be placated.
Implacable.
Implacable. November weather. As in, I'm guessing he's using this like, as in like it's relentless or nonstop or annoying or something. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth, and it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Waters had newly retired. I'm guessing there was a fuck ton of rain or something, so There's just like a ton of mud that's like from fresh rainwater that is all over the streets. It would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus, 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. I don't know what the point of that. There's so much rain that washed away so much mud that it could dig up a dinosaur. I don't know. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes, gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. People have their fireplaces on. There's smoke coming out. Metaphorically, the idea that you are turning your fire on, sad to see the sunlight go, to keep your home warm and to keep some light on, I guess. Dogs, undistinguishable in mire. Fuck, my vocab for old shit is so bad. Swampy or boggy ground. Oh, because the dogs have been outside in the muddy and everything else, so they're going to look gross. Horses, scarcely better. Splashed to their very blinkers. Horses are also muddy and dirty. Foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. A lot of people walking, slipping around in the gross, muddy street where the mud is wet and slippery, and you can probably see predictable footpaths and stuff where all the people have been walking, I guess, and starting to build up in gross, crummy ways where all the people are sliding around, I guess. If this day ever broke, what do you think that means? I don't know. What does it mean when you say a day breaks? Day break. Is that the start or the end of a day? If the day ever even began, or if the day ever even ended? I think it just speaks to the relentlessness, I guess, of the day and the weather and the everything. Daybreak. The day, dawn or daybreak has arrived. Okay, if this day ever broke, maybe because it's overcast or cloudy and miserable. I said it's Michaelmas term lately over, so it's going to be in winter, right? So is it even like, did we even get a daybreak or a dawn? It's just gross and disgusting and miserable all the time, right? Fog everywhere, fog up the river where it flows among green eights and meadows. A small island in a river. Fog down the river where it rolls, deified among the tears of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Pollution that is floating along the water from all those ships that are going up and down the river, I guess. Fog on the Essex marshes. Fog on the Kentish heights. More fog and smog. Fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs. Some kind of carriage or whatever. Oh, a sailing vessel. More ships. Fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships. Fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats. Fog in the eyes and throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners wheezing by the firesides of their wards. Old people. Fog. Coughing. Fog in the stem and bowl of the afternoon pipe of the wrathful skipper. A skipper's like a sailor, right? Down in his closed cabin. Fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivering little apprentice boy on deck. What do I need to translate this? There's a guy on deck who has to clean and do shit, and he's surrounded in the fog. He doesn't even get to go down into the cabin where the loser skipper is being a slacker. Chance people on the bridges peeping over the parapets into the nether sky of fog with fog all around them as if they were up in a balloon and hanging in the misty clouds. People just happening to be crossing over the bridge, looking down at all the foggy bullshit. Gas looming through the fog and divers places in the streets. Bro. Divers? Divers?
Divers.
People who dive. Divers places in the streets? Gas looming through the fog in divers places in the streets? Much as the sun may, from the spongy fields, be seen to loom by husbandman and plowboy. Gas looming through the fog in divers places, maybe like sewage, like lids where the gas is coming up from the sewers, if they have them. Most of the shops lighted 2 hours before their time, as the gas seems to know, for it is a haggard and unwilling look. There's enough smog and fog and everything around here that you can tell the fireplaces has been on for a while, I guess. The raw afternoon is rawest, and the dense fog is densest, and the muddy streets are muddiest near that leaden, heated old obstruction, appropriate ornament for the threshold of a leaden, heated old corporation temple bar, is a misinterpretation of leaden-headed, someone who is slow or dull. And hard by Temple Bar in Lincoln's Inn Hall, at the very heart of the fog, sits the Lord High Chancellor in his high court of chancery. Never can there come fog too thick, never can there come mud and mire too deep, to assort with the groping and floundering condition which this high court of chancery, most pestilent of hoary sinners, holds this day in the sight of heaven and earth. No matter how fucked and horrible the weather and all this bullshit is, the guy's always going to show up and do his fucking job and be a court guy? 2 more paragraphs. Jesus Christ. On such an afternoon, if ever... okay, I'm just going to read these 2 paragraphs and I'll interpret at the end, I guess. I don't even know. Jesus. On such an afternoon, if ever, the Lord High Chancellor ought to be sitting here, as here he is, with a foggy glory round his head, softly fenced... Wait. On such an afternoon, if ever... The Lord High Chancellor ought to be sitting here, as here he is, with a foggy glory round his head, softly fenced in, with crimson cloth and curtains, addressed by a large advocate with great whiskers, a little voice, and an interminable brief, and outwardly directing his contemplation to the lantern in the roof, where he can see nothing but fog. On such an afternoon, some score of members of the High Court of Chancery Bar ought to be, of the High Court of Chancery Bar, ought to be, as here they are, mistily engaged in one of the 10,000 stages of an endless cause, tripping one another up on slippery precedents, groping knee-deep in technicalities, running their goat hair and horsehair warded heads against walls of words and making a pretense of equity with serious faces, as players might. On such an afternoon, the various solicitors in the cause, some 2 or 3 of whom have inherited it from their fathers, who made a fortune by it, ought to be, as are they not, ranged in a line in a long-matted well, but you might look in vain for truth at the bottom of it, between the registrar's red table and the silk gowns with bills, cross-bills, answers, rejoinders, injunctions, affidavits, issues, references to masters' reports, mountains of costly nonsense piled before them. Well may the court be dim, with wasting candles here and there, well may the fog hang heavy in it, as if it would never get out, well may the stained-glass windows lose their color and admit no light of day into the place, well may the uninitiated from the streets who peep in through the glass panes in the door be deterred from entrance by its owlish aspect and by the drawl languidly echoing to the roof from the padded dais where the Lord High Chancellor looks into the lantern that has no light in it and where the attendant wigs are all stuck in a fog bank. This is the Court of Chancery, which has its decaying houses and its blighted lands in every shire, which has its worn-out lunatic in every madhouse, and its dead in every churchyard. Deed? Deed is D-E-E-D. Dead? Oh, the dead in every churchyard, literally. Which has its ruined suitor with its slop-shod heels and threadbare dress borrowing and begging through the round of every man's acquaintance, which gives to moneyed might the means abundantly of wearying out the right, which so exhausts finances, patience, courage, hope, so overthrows the brain and breaks the heart, that there is not an honorable man among its practitioners who would not give, who does not often give, the warning, suffer any wrong that can be done you rather than come here. Who happened to be in the Lord... So this guy hates court, based, I think, right? These are a bunch of miserable fucks that are just doing a bunch of busy work bullshit. It's just a ton of stupid shit. Passerbyers look in, it's just everything in here is fucked and weird and horrible and terrible, and people are in here for any stupid reason, but I think... mediation, notice immediate. Yeah, you have to do court-ordered mediation after discovery. I don't know if that'll get pushed back, though, because the court needs to see that you're making a good try at mediating your causes. I don't know what our mediation is going to be, though. I have no idea what the fuck she could possibly want to mediate on, so. But you have to do it. You're obligated to. Who happened to be in the Lord Chancellor's court this murky afternoon, besides the Lord Chancellor, the counsel in the case, 2 or 3 counsel who are never in any cause. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. The counsel in the cause, 2 or 3 counsel who are never in any cause, and the well of solicitors before mentioned. There is the registrar below the judge in wig and gown, and there are 2 or 3 maces or petty bags or privy purses or whatever they may be in legal court suits. These are all yawning, for no crumb of amusement ever falls from Jarndyce and Jarndyce, the cause in hand, which was squeezed dry years upon years ago. The shorthand writers, the reporters of the court, and the reporters of the newspapers invariably decamp with the rest of the regulars when Jarndyce and Jarndyce comes on. I don't know what the fuck this means. The cause in hand, it's just a legal term in Britain. Case in court. Is a fictional probate. Oh, it's like naming a... Oh, so V. We would say like Jarndyce v. Jarndyce. Okay. Standing on the seat of the side of the hall, the better to peer into the curtain of sanctuary. And it's cute. It's the same. It's just like boring, stupid shit. Like Smith versus Smith. It plays into the trivialness and the stupidity and the arbitrariness, I guess, of all this. Their places are a blank. Standing on a seat at the side of the hall, the better to peer into the curtain of sanctuary, is a little mad old woman in a squeezed bonnet who is always in court, from its sitting to its rising, and always expecting some incomprehensible judgment to be given in her favor. Some say she really is, or was, a party to a suit, but no one knows for certain because no one cares. She carries some small litter in a reticule, which she calls her documents, principally consisting of paper, matches, and dry lavender. Jesus. Okay. What is the quiz for this? Oh my God. Interpreted the meaning, okay, a process called the think aloud or talk aloud method. In this 1980 article, the writers defend this strategy as a valid way to gather evidence or on cognitive processing. People cannot understand it. Okay, I don't know if our brains work in different ways, but there's like 2 approaches that I take when I'm reading shit like this, okay? There's 2 approaches I take when I read shit like this, okay? If I'm reading like a technical thing, you've watched me study stuff before. I have no problem literally Googling or wikiing every single fucking word. And it's annoying, and it's like time consuming, and it is a slog, but you have to do it. So like reading, like Googling, wikiing everything I don't understand, just do that. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is you have to read it all. Even if it seems like you don't understand it, you have to force yourself to read it and like at least like grammatically make sense of it. Because what'll happen is here. Okay, so here's a thing that this actually took me a long time to learn. I don't know if this is just because I'm naturally a super high IQ, ingenious person who knows everything. I'm just kidding. I think this would apply to the average person. I don't know, maybe not. But like, you have to trust yourself a little bit, I think. You have to trust yourself a little bit when you read stuff that you will understand it if you slog through it. You can't, if you give up on a reading, you will never understand it, right? Like if you, I don't know how to explain this, but like if you read stuff and you're like, oh fuck, I don't know. What'll happen is you'll start to like, the rafting is fragment, and you just like, if and you're not even trying, you'll never understand it at that point. Although it sucks, sometimes if you have trouble understanding a thing, like reading through all of it and then trusting yourself to read through all of it and getting like some kind of a feel for it, because you've read all of it and you've read everywhere and you look stuff up, you can get like a vibe of it. And then when you go, and then you can go back and read it again with like the general vibe, the general understanding. And then hopefully on like a second reading, like stuff starts to solidify more. This is what I do if I come across stuff that's like really difficult to read, I guess. I would consider this fairly difficult, not because it's conceptually difficult, but the language is very weird to me. This is older writing and I just don't read older fiction stuff. But yeah. I could reread this, but I'm not going to. But so it seems like this, I don't know what this story is about, but there's a courthouse. This guy very clearly looks down upon the legal profession. He makes the most direct comment that he probably makes about it is the, you might look in vain for truth at the bottom of it. There's no point. You're not finding anything truthful or real here. The lady at the end might be representative of like, this is a person who goes to court every day. Supposedly she has some documents or papers, but nobody even knows what she shows up for anymore. It sounds like in this case, unless I misunderstood this, the 2 people who are the plaintiff and the defendant in this case don't even show up anymore. They either have representatives or nobody. That all of this is just a miserable fucking waste of every single fucking person's time. And it's all of these, this, I don't know what like writing strategy you would call here, but you know, like this person shows up, they're fighting over bills and cross bills and answers or rejoinders, injunctions, affidavits, issues, references to master's reports. Like he's spamming all this because it's like so much fucking stupid shit, right? So that's basically what this is a huge criticism of. Oh, and then obviously like the piece of advice, suffer any wrong that can be done you rather than come here. Suffer any wrong that can be done you rather than come here. Whatever you have to do to solve this outside of court, solve it outside of court. Please, God, don't come here. This is your warning, right? There is not an honorable man among its practitioners who would not give the warning. So, yeah. Also, I would say that fuck, I was going to say something. I don't remember it. Who cares? Yeah, whatever. The pros are just weird in this. It drones on and on. Well, I mean, I would always say I'm not a big appeal to, I'm not a big like appeal to, oh, I know what I was going to say. Tradition kind of person. But if there is a legendary author that everybody recognizes as being a legendary author, I'd be very careful about saying like, oh, this is droning or boring or bad. I hate English. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. I hate reading. I shouldn't say that. I didn't read much fiction, old fiction. But like, if Charles Dickens is revered as being one of the best like writers of all history or whatever, I'm pretty sure most people say like Charles Dickens is a great, a great writer. I wouldn't dismiss something like this out of hand as being just bad. I would be more likely to say like, I just don't understand it or it doesn't connect with me. Yeah. No, the suffer any wrong means to suffer consequences outside of court because court could be worse. No, well, suffer means an older definition for suffer means to like, I think to bear or deal with something. So for instance, like you will suffer my wrath doesn't mean you will be like sad or in pain but you're going to have to bear it or deal with it. So this is saying like literally anything that can be done wrong to you is better than having to come here. Suffer, deal with, bear any type of way to ameliorate or remediate your issue rather than come to court. Anything that can happen is better than having to come to this courthouse, is what he's saying here. Or might not even necessarily have to do with a court case. It'll just be anything. Anything is better than having to go to court. True and based. But okay. When I see stuff like this, I don't know if I would consider this a test necessarily of reading comprehension or more a test of like, does a student trust themselves to persevere enough through a writing to figure stuff out that's written in a very unfamiliar way to them? Also, for somebody said that it droned on and on, when you're reading fiction, you have to like set a scene. Like imagine if you watch like a movie and it was just like scene, action, scene, action, scene, action. Like sometimes you need like an establishing shot. You need to establish like a mood, a thing, something that like makes you feel a certain way, you know? Okay, sorry. These are English students. Considering the ubiquity of Shakespeare, they should understand this better than the average. Yeah, maybe. I don't know what they mean by English students. Like how many different majors that encompasses, sorry. Oh, I was going to say the second thing. It sounds kind of cringe and go to your room and lock yourself in if you don't want anybody to hear you. I think that reading stuff out loud, I think is important because I think to read something well out loud, you have to demonstrate like a conceptual understanding of the sentence. Does that make sense? Like, okay, it makes sense, right? Okay. You can tell with the way that a person is like pacing a sentence. Sometimes, like, even if I don't say a word wrong or mispronounce something, I'll go back and I'll reread it because I haven't put the emphasis on the correct part of the sentence because I didn't understand what I was reading. So sometimes reading stuff out loud helps you, it forces you to really understand what you're reading. Gas looming through the fog in divers places in the streets, much as the sun may from the spongy fields be seen to loom by husbandmen and plowboy. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know what the person is saying, right? Gas looming through the fog in divers places in the streets, much as the sun may from the spongy fields be seen to loom by husbandman and plowboy. I think when you force yourself to read it out loud and like put the cadences where they should, it forces you to have like an understanding of what you're reading, if that makes sense. Okay. Students read each sentence out loud and then interpreted the meaning in their own words, a process Erickson and Simon called the think aloud or talk aloud method. In this 1980 article, the writers defend their strategies, evaluating together evidence on cognitive processing. The revelation provided a measure of actual cognitive processing readers engage in during comprehension. Because we wanted to observe how much complex information English majors could obtain from the passage, we decided against other reading comprehension testing methods, such as the span tasks, where subjects recall end-of-sentence words on a series of sentences. We wanted as well to record how subjects understood each sentence in the passage, so we did not choose a broader think aloud test, which, for now explain, allows participants to choose when to think aloud during reading. I don't understand the dinosaur reference. If I go back and I reread this. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. There's a way that when it's raining a ton and the mud is runny everywhere, is like what this is referencing. And it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. I don't know what this is supposed to evoke or what this is. Oh, fuck. This is just a vocab thing. Sorry. Wonderful means surprise in this context. We don't use it that way contemporaneously anymore. That makes more sense. And it would not be such a surprise to meet a megalosaurus, 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill, because there's been so much rain, washed away so much mud, made it so disgusting. It wouldn't be surprising to see a dinosaur rise from the washed away earth. That makes more sense. Wonderful. Would not be so wonderful. Okay. We do use it like that? No. In modern English, we don't typically say wonderful as a surprise. Kind of like even awesome, we don't use that much. Like awesome used to mean like great or magnificent, but now usually we just use it like as an affirmative. Sometimes you'll hear like awesome power. I think my religious background, I hear awesome like that, but generally it's just like, oh, that's awesome. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it was sunny tomorrow? I don't think when people are saying wonderful there, they mean that like, wow, it would be such a surprise if it were sunny tomorrow. They mean it would be great if it was sunny tomorrow. Do you think there's no point in trying to debunk officially the BS rumors about you since they don't care? No, I'll write one for my final version, 10.1010 manifesto, but I have to wait till this court case ends. Did you watch the Hutch video yet? No. A principal concern for us was to test whether the subjects reached a level of proficient prose literacy, which is defined by the Department of Education as a capability of reading lengthy, complex, abstract prose text, as well as synthesizing information and making complex inferences. Literary prose can be more difficult to comprehend because it requires the ability to interpret unfamiliar diction and figures of speech. Dickens' novel worked, we, as an example, worked well. Typo in the study about English. Dickens' novel worked well as an example of literary prose because his writing contains frequent complex sentences and language that often moves from the literal to the figurative. He often mixes specific contemporary references to his 1820s setting. In addition, Bleak House is a standard in college literature classes, and so is important for English education students, who often are called on to teach Great Expectations and A Tale of Two Cities in high school. One assumption was that English majors who study similar types of literature and are trained in poetic language should be able to look up unfamiliar references to understand most of the literal meaning from the novel's first paragraphs. The 85 subjects in our test group came to college with an average ACT reading score of 22.4. Jesus. Which means, according to Educational Testing Services, that they read on a low intermediate level, able to answer only about 60% of the questions correctly. English majors had an ACT reading score of 22.4? Damn. English majors? Would they spend all their time in school studying? Sorry, just kidding. Usually able only to infer the main ideas or purpose of straightforward paragraphs and uncomplicated literary narratives. Locating important details in uncomplicated passages, or in other words, majority do not enter college with a proficient prose reading level necessary to read Bleak House or similar texts in the literary canon. Almost all the students participants were Caucasian, 2/3 were female, and almost all had graduated from Kansas public high schools. All except 3 self-reported A's and B's in their English courses. The number of African American and Latino subjects was too small a group to be statistically representative. 35% of our study subjects were seniors, 34% were juniors, 19 were sophomores, and 4 were freshmen. 41% of our subjects were English education majors, and the rest were English majors with traditional emphasis like literature or creative writing. As for the results of the degrees of reading test, most of our subjects scored in the 85 to 100% range on the test, with a few scoring 41 to 69%. Reading score. Oh, this is the degrees of reading test, not about this passage, but the general test they gave. Not too bad, I think, right? So 81% of them got an 80 or higher. Oops, okay, right? Okay. 59% of the problematic readers scored a 90 or above on the literacy test, suggesting that the ability to read on a 10th grade level does not ensure that students have the proficient prose literacy skill to read complex tests. Each taped reading test began with a brief questionnaire, which subject matters to give authors or Mm-hmm. 58% understood so little of the introduction to Bleak House that they would not be able to read the novel on their own. However, these same subjects, defined in the study as problematic readers, also believed they would have no problem reading the rest of the 900-page novel. Problematic readers often described their reading process as skimming and or relying on spark notes. Uh-oh. The majority of the 85 subjects used vague generalizations to summarize compound, complex sentences. 38% could understand more vocabulary and figures of speech than the problematic readers. These competent readers, however, could interpret only about half of the literal prose in the passage, and only 5% had a detailed literal understanding of the first paragraphs of Bleak House. Overall, we found that problematic readers had no successful reading tactics to help them understand Bleak House, so they quickly became lost and floundered throughout the reading test. Competent readers were not so lost because they came to the reading test with a larger vocabulary and could thereby understand more of Dickens' language. They were, however, as likely as the problematic readers to avoid translating more difficult language or extended figures of speech. The only active readers were in the proficient group, 5% of the time. Okay. These readers immediately recognized when they were lost and were able to turn back and use successful tactics to understand the meaning of each clause and phrase in an extended sentence. Because you got to look it all up, right? Because they were able to understand much more of the concrete detail in each sentence, they could follow Dickens' narrative in Bleak House. They could translate some of the figurative language as well and understood some of the major symbolic meanings of the passage. Original text, London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Were you allowed to go back and do it? I think on our first pass I would do really
that
bad.
Our students.
Stop! I would have to go back after reading it all. I wonder if they let you do that. And I don't know exactly what Lord Chancellor is, some person of authority, so that's probably what I would go with. Sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall, which would be like maybe a hotel or something. So 10-second pause. The student is clicking on her phone and breathing heavily. Bruh. They did these people dirty. Okay, so Michaelmas term is the first academic term of the year, so Lincoln's Inn Hall is probably not a hotel, laughs. 16 seconds of breathing, chair creaking. Then she whispers, I'm just going to skip that. Oh no, don't do that. The subject was far from alone in her reading process, a situation we explored from a wider perspective. I thought there was no time limit, Destiny. Didn't you catch that on the first pass? There might have been a time limit because they said 20 minutes here, but I think they told the students that there was no time limit because they didn't want them to rush. So maybe they stopped them at 20 minutes. They just didn't tell them there was a time limit. The three main reading tactics that problematic readers used were oversimplifying, guessing, and commenting. The scary thing, oh my God, I used to complain about Melina doing, this was with translating language. I could tell sometimes if I would say a word or say a phrase and she didn't understand it, but she was nodding along and I would be like, wait, do you know what I just said? And sometimes non-native speakers will use context clues to try to fill stuff in, which you can use to some extent. But if you're like too, if you don't know enough and you're trying to context clue fill in too much stuff, you can just miss important things that you won't be able to infer the meaning of whatever you're reading. It's too much. The most common was oversimplifying, that is reducing the details of a complex sentence to a generic statement. In the first paragraph of Bleak House Dickens bubbles, the fog on the river. I always pronounce this wrong. Say this stupid shit.
And still see the River Thames.
River Thames. What a stupid spelling. As it moves from the center of London and winds down to the Essex marshes, 51 miles away from the city, he then centers on the shipyard and the Holborn district, the same district that includes original text. Fog up the river, where it flows among green aites and meadows, fog down the river where it rolls, defiled among the tiers of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Oh, I wonder if metaphorically the idea is like all of the fog and pollution that this city is producing is all rolling down to this courthouse because it like metaphorically collects all of the junk and trash of society where these people go to court and they have to do, and it's just like all of the dredges and gross and stupid, irrelevant, dumb shit like pollution is ending up in this courthouse maybe. Okay, there's just fog everywhere. A few minutes later in the taped session, fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats. Facilitator. Okay, so what do you see in this sentence besides fog? I know there's train and there's like the industrial part of the city? Question mark. Another thing that sucks as well is if you're reading something, if you don't have an underlying, that's not the wrong way. If you don't have an understanding of the underlying text, like just the vocab, if you're reading something that's like advanced prose, the person is not just communicating like what the prose is. Usually there's like I don't know if you'd say like a meta concept. There's something above it that it's trying to communicate as well. And if you don't understand like all the underlying vocab, it's impossible to get like the more complex idea too, which also sucks. By reducing all these details in the passage to vague generic language, the subject does not read closely enough to follow the fog as it moves throughout the shipyards, and as she continues to skip over almost all the concrete details in the following sentences, she never recognizes that this literal fog as it expands throughout London becomes a symbol for the confusion, disarray, and blindness of the... Oh, okay, there you go. 96% of the problematic readers use oversimplified phrases at least once to summarize a sentence in the test passage, while 60% use this method for 5 or more sentences. Often subjects use text as a shortcut when they become overwhelmed by a sentence with multiple clauses. This overwhelming feeling, I used to get this all the time. I still do sometimes. You really just have to force yourself to look up everything and read. You really have to trust yourself. You really, really, really need to trust yourself to just fight through it. Like look up every word and read it all and then go back and you can do it. One subject disclosed that oversimplifying was a normal tactic, explaining, I normally don't try to analyze individual sentences as I'm reading something. I try to look at the overall bigger picture of what's going on. This works if you're reading like simple prose, but when you get into more complex stuff, you're going to miss a lot if you're just missing underlying words. Stuff you're just going to start omitting whole sentences, right? You might miss something important. Maybe not, but sometimes you can. Another subject said that she separated reading from thinking. I'm just reading it, the text. I'm not thinking about it yet. Those subjects, however, who relied on oversimplification became more and more lost as they continued to read the test passage. In fact, 82% of the problematic readers told the facilitators that they were confused at least once during the test, and 26% they lost 5 or more times. The second most commonly used tactic by problematic readers was guessing. Instead of looking up the definition of a word or phrase, these subjects often just guessed at the meaning. 75% of the readers did so incorrectly and then misread that section of the sentence. This problem, however, did not occur all the time. 41% of those same readers guessed the right meaning of a word, and 20% who defined a word incorrectly did not continue to misinterpret the language that followed. Sometimes you can get lucky. Original text. On such an afternoon, if ever, the Lord High Chancellor ought to be sitting here, as here he is, with a foggy glory round his head, softly fenced in with crimson cloth and curtains, addressed by a large advocate with great whiskers, a little voice, and an interminable brief, and outwardly directing his contemplation to the lantern in the roof, where he can see nothing but fog. Subject, describing him in a room with an animal, I think, great whiskers. Facilitator, laughs. Excuse me, sir. Do you ever hear about the education debate between teaching concepts versus teaching facts? That JJ Canadian guy talked about it and I thought it was interesting. Yeah, actually, I watched that video. I think he's kind of right. Teaching concepts and being able to conceptualize things and use like patterns and everything is really important. But this is my big complaint about people like Asmongold and XQC. There is no shortcut for knowing discrete facts. You have to know things. You can't just guesswork your way to everything. Like, it's really funny because all these reading problems here, this is a microcosm of like what I would say Asmongold's entire problem is with politics, is making too many assumptions about things he doesn't understand and then doing guesswork to patch the rest of it. Note that the subject, they're roasting her. Note that the subject, who is not accessing any of the concrete details in the passage, finds a subject, the Lord Chancellor, and one recognizable word, whiskers, and concludes that the character is in a room with a cat. At this point, she does not seem to understand what she is reading, and so she links a few words together to form some kind of response. Destiny. This exercise is fucking dumb in my opinion. It's like you're being dropped into a whole new world of memes, with words having different meanings than what you're used to. They should have tried this test on faculty with some intense Omegaverse scene or jargon thick 4chan copy pasta with obscure memes every second sentence. Well, no, I think the point was to demonstrate problem solving. Like, how do you work your way through text that's difficult? I think that was the whole point, right? Which is good. You should see how people problem solve, I think. Let's see. That's what he suggests for the faculty. Well, that's kind of his point. What do you mean? Chatter's saying faculty would be just as bad at interpreting internet lingo. I mean, maybe they would be interpreting internet lingo? The question would be whether or not, I mean, actually that's possible. I guess you would have to see how faculty tries to decipher it if you wanted to. But I mean, that could be a criticism of faculty as well. And actually that could even be a legitimate criticism because we can see that play out in the real world sometimes when you see adults trying to, actually, that's a fine point. When you see like the bullets that Charlie Kirk shooter had and people look for a word like fascist, oh my God, he was an Antifa guy. And it's like, well, hold on. What were the rest of the references to? Like, let's use some complex thought. Is that really what the reference was? Why didn't he shoot him with the Antifa bullet? Why wouldn't he use that bullet if that was like the most important part of the message? And why is it that all the other references also seem to align with pop culture? Yeah, like you can make that criticism. And I think that would even be, that'd be like a fair criticism. I don't know about America, but Dickens' high school level Destiny, mostly a tale of two cities and great expectations. There's no excuse to be baffled by him in college LeMayo. I don't know this particular thing, or this particular book, Bleak, whatever the fuck this is. I would not expect the average high schooler to be able to read this, though. I don't know if I would expect the average American to be able to read this. Well, actually, it sounds like the average American can't read it, so because the average English major can't read it, so yeah. The subject cannot make the leap to figurative language. She first guesses that the dinosaur is just bones and then is stuck stating that the bones are waddling all up the hill because she can see that Dickens is the dinosaur moving. Because she cannot logically tie the ideas together, she just leaves her interpretation as is and goes on to the next sentence. Like, and page 10, this subject, most problematic readers were not concerned if their literal translations of Bleak House were not coherent, so obvious logical errors never seemed to affect them. In fact, none of the readers in this category ever questioned their own interpretations of figures of speech, no matter how irrational the results. Worse, their inability to understand figurative language was constant, even though most of the subjects had spent at least 2 years in literature classes that discussed figures of speech. Some could correctly identify a figure of speech and even explain its use in a sentence, but correct responses were inconsistent and haphazard. None of the problematic readers showed any evidence that they could read recursively or fix previous errors in comprehension. They would stick to their reading tactics even if they were unhappy with the results. Oof. That's why I said I think it's good if after you read a passage to like go back to the beginning and reread it with your understanding from like start to finish, and then hopefully like more of the stuff in the beginning kind of like makes sense, I think, too, right? Destiny, you think faculty would not take advantage of open phone / book better though? Maybe. I don't know what they would look up for like meme text or if they could understand that. I'm not sure. Want to try reading one of the passages? We read it. The 2 pages. Many subjects in the category defined reading Bleak House as skimming the text and relying on spark notes, which give plot summaries, characterizations, and analyses to understand what they had just read. 35% would rely heavily on spark notes to understand the basic meaning of the text. 12% relied on other outside sources like Google or Wikipedia. These subjects seem to use outside sources as the main way to understand what they could not comprehend on their own. As one subject said, if I was to read this Bleak House by itself and didn't use anything like that spark notes, I don't think I would actually understand what's going on 100% of the time. Are these students info-seeking / problem-solving skills not pretty bad if they can Google the meaning of words and stuff? Well, it's a matter of like, you have to be able to know what to Google. Then you have to Google the word or thing. And then you have to Google the word or thing. And then you have to be able to go back and insert that into the sentence. And then once you figured out what the things in the sentence mean, you have to be able to extract from that some higher prose meaning that's not just like the factual, like word, syntax and grammar, you know? Destiny, what's the mediation thing about on December 22nd? It's just court order mediation to see if we can reach some agreement or settlement on the case before it goes any further. But I don't know if that'll get pushed back if discovery is extended. Destiny, not to go off topic, what are your thoughts on the Yale debates yesterday? Oh, I thought they were pretty good. I thought they were pretty high quality. Yeah. The competent readers in our study, which constituted 38% of our subjects, were better readers in the problematic group because they knew more vocabulary and could interpret some figurative language. Most of the competent readers understood about half of the literal prose in the passage. They could also recognize more figures of speech. Some could guess that certain words like fog might be symbolic. Would it be symbolic or metaphorical? Like, I'm sure there's real fog in a city, but it's also a metaphor for what's going on as well, right? Because these readers had a grasp of the generic meaning of most sentences, they could keep moving through the first few paragraphs of Bleak House without feeling completely lost. The results were not all good. The competent readers, like the problematic group, were not active in their practice. 96% would define words incorrectly, and 46% would skip words they did not understand. Essentially, they were comfortable with their confusion. If they became lost translating a sentence or a figure of speech, they would often just make an arbitrary guess or skip that section and move on. Not good. I'm going to ask you to explain what you've read so far. 2 characters, it's pointed out this Michael Mass and Lord Chancellor described as sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Talk about the November weather out in the streets, and I probably do need to look up Megalosaurus. This is probably some kind of an animal or something. Or another that is talking about encountering in the street and wandering like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. So, yep, I think we've encountered some kind of an animal. These characters have met in the street. I guess I just assumed this was a dinosaur. Maybe I shouldn't have. Okay. Because the majority of subjects in the competent category were passive readers, they would probably give up their attempts to read Bleak House after a few chapters. In the reading test, most of the competent readers began to move to vague summaries of the sentences halfway through the passage and did not look up definitions of words, even after they were confused by the language. None of the subjects in this group were actively trying to link the ideas of one section to the next or build a big picture meaning of the narrative. Like the problematic readers, most would interpret specific details in each sentence without linking ideas together. Holy fuck. I wonder if this is like a really pervasive thing. I'm getting like fucking PTSD flashbacks from looking up like Finkelstein's fucking citations and how there'd be like one sentence, but like if you read the book or not the book, like the passage or the chapters, it's not really supporting what he's sourcing them for. None of the subjects in this group is like they would eventually become too lost to understand what they were reading. For example, 59% of competent readers did not look up legal words like chancery or advocate, and by the end of the reading test, 55% had no idea that the passage was focused on lawyers in a courtroom. 6 of the 32 competent readers were much better readers who understood more of the literal prose in Bleak House. They actively looked up some terms and were more skilled than other competent readers in interpreting figures of speech, though they did not understand as much of the text as the proficient readers and read very slowly. They could probably comprehend more of Bleak House than the other competent readers. 5% were proficient readers. They stood out because they continually looked up words they did not know. Nice. That's what we do, guys, right? They clearly had better basic vocabulary than the other student readers. They could correctly guess, for example, the meaning of words like implacable and pensioners. They could also recognize figurative language and avoided the trap of translating metaphors and similes literally. With these abilities, proficient readers comprehended many of the details in each sentence and could interpret successive phrases and clauses of a sentence to grasp its full meaning. One subject in this category demonstrated this higher level of comprehension. Foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been... Okay. And he's talking about foot traffic within the city. I said London first. I didn't say that out loud, but it's taking place in London. He's talking about the foot traffic and how the weather's creating an ill temper between people and everybody's jostling and fighting with each other for a position on streets that are paved. It's not a pavement, it's a mess, so it's not perfectly smooth and level, and so people are slipping and sliding on cobblestone or whatever it happens to be, and he's connecting that with the past and saying how they're just the latest generation of people to be walking and jostling in bad weather through these stones, that other people have gone before them and done these exact things, and it accumulates at compound interest. Oh, okay, so connecting it more with just the day and the people, but actually like generations past who have, okay. Adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement, and accumulating, I'm assuming, compound interest means it's interest on top of interest, and so it's the mud growing exponentially, if you will, and that's one whole paragraph right there. The difference in this reading test is immediately clear. Instead of making a generalized statement to summarize the entire sentence, the subject carefully attempts to interpret each successive clause. He's interested in the details of the setting, stating that the setting is in London, and then trying to find a reason why so many people would be slipping and sliding on the road. Perhaps he thinks it is because the street is constructed of cobblestones instead of pavement. He then finds a good way to explain Dickens' clause, where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping by saying that the people in the latest generation. Okay. Good job. Good waste of time, whoever linked this fucking loser. What is this? Oh, I don't get to hear it. I don't get to hear it. It won't play for me. Did you watch this meme yet?
All right, just take a few deep breaths and relax your body. I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Man, I got like no sleep last night, bro. I hope I'm good.
No.
Chat, I think you hurt me. Chat, you think you're going hurt?
What do you mean, chat?
Oh my God.
What do you mean, chat?
Wait.
Chat.
Oh no. My live streamer surgeon. Will this have the audio? Fuck! Well, no math for us.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, Stephen.
Bro, it's just doodling nonsense. Oh, if I'm just like doing stuff at the end of a debate, I have the eraser thing on my pen and I'm just erasing the shit that I wrote before. Actually, I'm drawing giant dicks. Will you buy one of these in the future? Jump up again. Do it. Loser.
He just say anybody could watch my kids except Miller?
Well, I think in fairness, he's worried that if I babysat his kids, they come back after a couple hours and they would say, "Daddy, why don't you send the military into Minnesota to help us with the Somali refugees?" So, I think...
Miller, you constantly. You're trouble. I bet people are just trying to contain you at the White House. Don't let Miller off the leash. All right. He did say, though, he just say anybody could watch
things go. True. This creates danger. And I'll tell you what, in my time on this, I'd never seen this before. People driving by my house and using the R word in front of people. This is shameful.
What?
And I have yet to see an elected official, a Republican elected official, say, "You're right, that's shameful. He should not say it." So look, I'm worried. We know how these things go. They start with taunts, they turn to violence. So deeply concerned. True.
I read this headline differently. I thought it said Tim Walz calls people driving by his house retarded, but I think his son has, I don't know if his son has special needs or something, or has some kind of scoliosis or something. I don't remember, but I think he has something. Autism? Everybody's got autism. Bro, that's like ADHD these days. Here's a gift link. Oh.
Cut from a different cloth.
I am cut from a different cloth. Hold on one second.
And with Bank of America Private Bank, you have an entire team tailored to your needs. With wealth and business strategies built for the biggest ambitions, like yours. Whatever your passion, unlock more powerful possibilities at privatebank.bankofamerica.com. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America, official bank of the FIFA World Cup 2026. Bank of America Private Bank is a division of Bank of America N.A., member FDIC, and a wholly owned subsidiary of Bank of America Corporation.
You're listening to A Recipe for Idiocracy by Rose Horowitz, published on the 19th of November, 2025. This audio article was produced by audio journalism app Noah, News Over Audio, and 11 Labs using an AI voice. For the past several years, America has been using its young people as lab rats in a sweeping, if not exactly thought-out, education experiment. Schools across the country have been lowering standards and removing penalties for failure. The results are coming into focus. 5 years ago, about 30 incoming freshmen at UC San Diego arrived with math skills below high school level. Now, according to a recent report from UC San Diego faculty and administrators, that number is more than 900, and most of those students don't fully meet middle school math standards. Many students struggle with fractions and simple algebra problems. Last year, the university, which admits fewer than 30% of undergraduate applicants, launched a remedial math course that focuses entirely on concepts taught in elementary and middle school. According to the report, more than 60% of students who took the previous version of the course couldn't divide a fraction by 2. One of the course's tutors noted that students faced more issues with logical thinking than with math facts per se. They didn't know how to begin solving word problems. The university's problems are what
do you do in school? What do they do? They can't read? They can't do math? What the fuck are these kids doing? What are they doing all day? Get off your goddamn phones. Ban them.
Extreme, but they are not unique. Over the past 5 years, all of the other University of California campuses, including UC Berkeley and UCLA, have seen the number of first years who are unprepared for pre-calculus double or triple. George Mason University in Virginia revamped its remedial math summer program in 2023 after students began arriving at their calculus course unable to do algebra, the math department chair, Maria Emelianenko, told me. We call it quantitative literacy, just knowing which fraction is larger or smaller, that the slope is positive when it is going up. Janine will...
Wasn't there like a boomer version of this where, am I making this up? Like if you asked I feel like I saw this as when I was a kid, where it's like if you ask the average American what's bigger, like a half pounder versus like a third pounder of like beef, like half of Americans say the 1/3 is bigger than the 1/2. Am I making this up? Can we remember this shit?
Wilson, the chair of the undergraduate economics program at UC Davis, told me, "Things like that are just kind of in our bones when we are college ready. We are just seeing many folks without that capability." Part of what's happening here is that as more students choose STEM majors, more of them are being funneled into introductory math courses during their freshman year. But the national trend is very clear. America's students are getting much worse at math. The decline started about a decade ago and sharply accelerated during the coronavirus pandemic. The average 8th grader's math skills, which rose steadily from 1990 to 2013, are now a full school year behind where they were in 2013, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the gold standard for tracking academic achievement. Students in the bottom 10th percentile have fallen even further behind. Only the top 10% have recovered to 2013 levels. On the one hand, this means that math scores are close to where they were in the 1970s, hardly the dark ages. On the other hand, losing 50 years' worth of math education progress is a clear disaster. How did this happen? One theory is that the attention-shredding influence of phones and social media is to blame. The dip in math scores coincides with the widespread adoption of smartphones. By 2015, nearly 3...
Yeah, I guess I just don't know what we should, like... You probably can't sit into, like, high school classes, huh? I need to go undercover with Nathan to school and figure out what you guys are doing all day. What the fuck? What are they doing?
3/4 of high school-aged kids had access to one.
Don't tell Willie.
A related possibility is that technology is making students complacent. Emelianenko told me that students are just not engaged in math classes anymore. They seem to believe that they don't need to learn math because they can use AI instead.
Oh, God.
Or maybe students
Radiant.
have stopped achieving in math because schools have stopped demanding it of them. During the George W. Bush administration, federal policy emphasized accountability for public schools. Schools that saw poor performance on standardized tests received increased funding at first, but if scores still didn't improve, they had their funding pulled. Research suggests that this helped improve math outcomes, particularly for poor black students. After 2015, however, the federal government backed in math classes anymore. They seem to believe that they don't need to learn math because they can use AI instead. Or maybe students have stopped achieving in math because schools have stopped demanding it of them. During the George W. Bush administration, federal policy emphasized accountability for public schools. Schools that saw poor performance on standardized tests received increased funding at first, but if scores still didn't improve, they had their funding pulled. Research suggests that this helped improve math outcomes, particularly for poor black students. After 2015, however, the federal government backed off from its accountability measures, which had faced bipartisan criticism. Some teachers' unions and progressive parents wanted less emphasis on standardized tests, and some conservative politicians wanted the federal government to remove itself from education policy. Many schools across the country have shifted toward making math engaging for students at the expense of evidence-based teaching practices.
Evidence-based?
And due to funding shortages or misguided efforts to improve equity, many students are held back from taking the hardest math courses. The pandemic supercharged the decline. Districts that spent most of the 2020-21 school year mandating remote learning saw students fall more than half a grade behind in math.
How do you fall half a grade behind in math? Asmigel was just talking about you. Cool. I hope he said nice things about me.
Districts that reopened earlier saw more modest declines. These difficulties prompted teachers to further relax their standards. Everyone was just exhausted and challenged by the circumstances around the pandemic. Joshua Goodman, a Boston University professor of economics and education, told me. And I think one of the reactions to that was for everyone involved to say, let's lower our expectations. Let's make sure that we don't fail students when they're not doing their work, because the world is challenging right now.
Oh my God.
Many districts adopted a no zeros policy, forcing teachers to pass students who had little command of the material. One study of public school students across Washington state found that almost none received an F in spring 2020, while the share of students who received A's skyrocketed. Math grades have remained elevated in the years since. Together, these changes meant that even as students' math preparation was stagnating, their grades were going up. The UC San Diego report notes that more than a quarter of the students who placed into the elementary and middle school level remedial course last year had earned straight A's in their high school math classes. Almost all of them had taken advanced math courses in high school. At the same time, the UC system eliminated its best tool for assessing students' academic preparedness. In 2020, system leaders voted to phase standardized test scores out of admissions decisions. They argued that the tests worsened racial divides and unfairly privileged wealthy students. But SAT and ACT...
One of the biggest copes, I feel like I've said this for years, maybe 5 years, one of the biggest copes ever, bigger than the BMI cope, bigger than the IQ cope, was the cope that, like, tests are all just unfair and biased, and tests don't actually matter at all, and people who do good on tests are just people who are good test takers. And it's like there is like a degree of truth to this, but it is a very small degree of truth. My understanding is that standardized tests are like highly G-loaded tests, meaning that these like track pretty closely to a person's like actual intelligence. And the idea that like all these things just don't matter and there are other ways, like there might be other ways to test things, but it's not by just ignoring these and memeing your way through it.
Scores are the most reliable predictors of a student's math ability, the report found. It's not really surprising then that you're going to be admitting more students who aren't ready for mathematics, because you removed the one piece of data that would have told you that. Morgan Polikoff, an education professor at the University of Southern California, told me. That same year, the UC system dramatically increased the number of students it enrolled from under-resourced high schools. These students are much more likely to place into Math 2, the elementary and middle school level remedial course. The new report calls on the UC system to consider reinstating the use of standardized test scores in admissions, and for UC San Diego to bring its enrollment of students from under-resourced schools back in line with that of other selective UC colleges. Admitting large numbers of students who are profoundly underprepared risks harming the very students we hope to support by setting them up for failure, the report observes. Bringing back standardized test scores might help elite institutions get out of the remedial math business, but it will not address the underlying problem of widespread innumeracy. Regardless of what a university is doing in terms of its admissions process, American students have been getting weaker in terms of their math skills for about the past decade, Goodman told me. Already, researchers predict a massive economic cost from declining quantitative skills. Dan Goldhaber, the director of the Center for Education Data and Research at the University of Washington, told me that he doesn't know of anyone who denies that young people are much worse at math than they used to be. Instead, most of the arguments for optimism hinge on the idea that students might no longer need foundational math skills, because they could use AI instead, an idea he thinks is absurd. The other academics I spoke with tended to agree. Who is going to trust somebody who got a degree in airline engineering, who doesn't know how to think through a problem without a computer telling them the answer? Brian Conrad, a Stanford math professor, told me, the premise that foundational ideas don't need to be learned anymore is a recipe for idiocracy. That was A Recipe for Idiocracy by Rose Horowitz.
Wow.
This
Title
audio
drop.
article was produced
Right
by
at the
audio
end.
journalism app NOAA,
Crazy.
News Over Audio, and 11 Labs using an AI voice.
They say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Uh-oh.
My name is John Dick, and I'm never, ever in the wrong room. So I started a podcast to introduce you to some of the brilliant people I've encountered along the way. But we'll also keep it real.
I'm never in the wrong. Does that mean he's always the dumbest person in the room? Wait, let's do this real quick before we do the Hutch thing.